He handed me divorce papers while I was connected to an IV. Not at home. Not in a lawyer's office. In the oncology ward. He stood at the foot of my hospital bed, like a man delivering bad news to a stranger. Polite, rehearsed, emotionally detached. And the craziest part? He looked relieved, like he had finally solved a problem. The nurse had just finished adjusting my drip when he walked in. The smell of antiseptic clung to everything, and the air was cold in that way hospitals always are. Clean, or sharp, unforgiving. My arm felt heavy from the cannula. My mouth tasted like metal. Chemo day. I turned my head when I heard the door click. Ethan, my husband, CEO of Halston Ridge Holdings, the man everyone in the city called untouchable. He wasn't holding flowers. He wasn't holding my hand. He was holding a thin brown envelope. "Hi," he said, like this was any normal visit. I blinked slowly, trying to focus. "You're early." "I had a meeting nearby," he replied. A meeting nearby, as if the oncology ward was just another stop between boardrooms. He glanced at the IV tubing, then at my face. His eyes didn't soften. That was when my stomach tightened. Not from nausea, from instinct. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He placed the envelope on the bed tray, beside my untouched cup of water. "I think this is best for both of us," he said. I stared at the envelope. I didn't touch it yet. My fingers remained resting on the blanket, as if moving them would make it real. "Ethan," I whispered. He exhaled, like he had been carrying this sentence for days and was tired of holding it. "I can't do this anymore, Claire." "Do what?" "Stand beside your wife while she fights cancer." I swallowed and forced my voice steady. "Are you leaving?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. Then he paused, choosing words like he was negotiating a contract. "This situation has become complicated. Complicated. My illness had become complicated. My life had become inconvenient." I stared at him harder, trying to recognize the man I married. The man who once drove across town at midnight because I'd had a nightmare. The man who promised me, hand on my belly, the day we lost our first pregnancy. "I'm not going anywhere." But here he was, going. He tapped the envelope once with 2 fingers. "They're papers. My lawyer prepared everything." "My lawyer?" I repeated. His jaw tightened. "Claire, please don't make this harder." "Harder?" He said that to the woman with an IV in her arm and poison in her veins. I let out a breath that sounded almost like laughter. But it wasn't. It was disbelief, trying to escape without breaking me. "So you're divorcing me," I said, slowly, like I needed to hear it in plain words. He didn't deny it. He just said, "I've been under a lot of pressure." Pressure. As if I hadn't been vomiting for days. As if I hadn't watched my hair come out in clumps in the shower. As if I hadn't learned to smile at people who looked at me with pity. "Is there someone else?" I asked quietly. His eyes flickered for half a second. That was all it took. I didn't need a confession. I'd been married long enough to read his silences like a second language. He straightened his cufflinks, a nervous habit, one he had when investors were in the room. "There's no point discussing that," he said. So there was someone else. I looked away for a moment, focusing on the slow drip of medication entering my bloodstream. One drop, then another, then another. It was strange how calm I felt. Not because it didn't hurt, but because deep down I had been preparing for this without admitting it to myself. It started 3 months ago, the day I got my diagnosis. Stage 2. Treatable, but aggressive. I remember sitting on the edge of the bathroom tub with the paper in my hand while Ethan stood in the doorway, silent. He had hugged me, but he had said the right words. "We'll get through this." But his arms had felt stiff. His eyes had looked past me, like he was already calculating the cost. Not emotional cost, financial, reputational, time. I saw it then, but I ignored it, because love makes you excuse what your instincts warn you about. After that, he became present in appearance only. He came to one appointment, then started missing them. He would text instead of visiting. He would send a driver. He would ask, "So how did it go?" in the same tone he used to ask about quarterly earnings. And when I lost my hair, he didn't touch my head. He kissed my cheek like I was fragile glass. Then he began staying late at the office, overnight meetings, business dinners, out-of-town conferences that didn't appear on the company calendar. And when I asked him once, gently, if he could just come home earlier, if he could just sit with me on the couch like we used to, he stared at me for a long moment and said something I'll never forget. "I can't let this consume my whole life, Claire. This, my cancer, my body, my survival." I hadn't realized then that he wasn't talking about fear. He was talking about inconvenience. I came back to the present and looked at the envelope again. I finally picked it up. It was heavier than paper should feel, but maybe because it carried the weight of betrayal, or maybe because it carried something else, too. Something he didn't know. I opened it slowly. Divorce petition. Settlement terms. A neat list of what he believed I deserved. It was almost generous, if you didn't know what it meant to be married to a man like Ethan Halston. He offered me a comfortable lump sum, a condo outside the city, health insurance coverage for a limited time. Limited time. As if cancer follows deadlines. As I scanned the papers silently, Ethan watched my face the way he watched stock charts, searching for spikes, for emotion, for reaction. I gave him none. I turned the page, and there it was, the clause that told me everything. Confidentiality, non-disparagement. He didn't want a divorce. He wanted silence. He wanted me gone without a ripple, without the board hearing, without investors worrying, without the city whispering that the CEO abandoned his sick wife. I looked up at him. He mistook my calm for defeat. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he said, softer now. "I'm not a monster." I held his gaze and let my voice come out almost gentle. "I'm not going to beg you to stay." His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. "You're being reasonable," he said, like he was impressed. Reasonable. Like my marriage was a negotiation. I nodded slowly, still calm. Then I asked the one question that made his expression shift. "Did you already tell the board?" His face tightened. "But no, why would I?" I smiled faintly. "Just curious." Because the board wasn't his safety net. It was mine. And the company he was so worried about protecting, the one he thought I didn't understand, the one he thought I had no claim to. It wasn't simply ours. It was legally in my name, not the whole thing, not publicly, not on paper that everyone could see. But enough. Enough that if I spoke one sentence in the right room, his CEO title would become a memory. He didn't know any of that yet. What he thought I was sick, weak, and desperate, and I let him think it. Because the truth is, sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's a strategy. I placed the papers back on the tray. Ethan looked relieved, like he expected me to sign right there. "I'll have my lawyer send over a pen," he said. I looked at him and kept my tone soft. "No need." He paused. "No need." I won't sign today, I said calmly. His relief evaporated instantly. Claire! I'm in treatment, I continued, voice steady. If you're going to walk away, you can at least wait until the poison stops dripping into my veins. For the first time, his mask cracked. You're trying to punish me, he said quietly. I tilted my head slightly. No, Ethan. I looked at the IV, then back at him. I'm giving you one last chance to remember who you are. His eyes hardened again, defensive. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the walls might listen. You don't understand what's at stake. I held his gaze, calm as still water. Oh, I said softly. I understand exactly what's at stake. And that's when I watched him realize, just for a second, that I wasn't as powerless as he wanted me to be. He didn't come to my next treatment. He sent flowers, white orchids, the kind displayed in luxury hotel lobbies. There was no card, just the florist's generic message, wishing you strength. Strength? I almost laughed. By then, I already knew there was someone else. Not because I caught them together. Men like Ethan don't get caught. They transition. It happened gradually. He stopped wearing his wedding ring. He started changing cologne. He spent more time mentoring a new executive hire. Her name was Vanessa Cole. 32. Brilliant resume. Stanford MBA. Public relations strategist. And very photogenic. I had seen her once at the annual shareholders' gala last year. She was standing too close to Ethan when photographers gathered. Her hand lingered on his sleeve a second longer than necessary. I noticed it. But I said nothing. Silence is a powerful thing when you're observing. 2 weeks after he served me divorce papers, I received an email notification from the company's internal calendar system. I still had administrative access. He had forgotten that. Board meeting. Emergency session. Subject line, leadership continuity planning. Continuity. That word only appears when a CEO anticipates instability, illness, scandal, or transition. I stared at the date. 3 days from now. He was moving quickly. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was securing his position. That night, he finally came home. I was sitting at the dining table, wearing a silk headscarf, reviewing documents on my laptop. He stopped when he saw me working. You shouldn't be stressing yourself, he said. I looked up slowly. About my own company? He stiffened slightly. It's my company, he corrected. There it was again. Ownership, possession, narrative control. I closed the laptop gently. Ethan, I said calmly, when were you planning to tell me about the emergency board session? His face changed, only slightly, but enough. Who told you? He asked. No one had to. He walked toward the kitchen, poured himself a drink. You don't need to be involved in this, he said over his shoulder. It's procedural. Procedural. Replacing your sick wife. Reassuring investors. Rewriting loyalty. I assume Vanessa will be attending, I said evenly. The glass in his hand paused mid-air. This isn't about her. Of course it isn't. He turned slowly. There's nothing inappropriate happening. I nodded. I didn't say there was. Silence stretched between us. He hated it when I stayed calm. He preferred emotional reactions, tears, anger, something he could dismiss as instability. You've changed, he said finally. Yes, I replied. I have. Because illness clarifies people. It shows you who stands beside you when you are inconvenient. He took a long sip of his drink. I'm trying to protect the company, he said. And from what exactly? He didn't answer, because saying it aloud would expose the truth. He believed my illness was a liability, a weak image, an unpredictable headline. He wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting his reputation. The next afternoon, I received something unexpected. An invitation. Private dinner. Investor circle. Were hosted by Ethan Halston. Location, the Meridian Club. Vanessa Cole is listed as co-host. Co-host. Interesting. He wasn't even divorced yet. He was transitioning publicly, testing the waters. I studied the guest list. 3 board members, 2 major investors, a media executive. He wasn't just introducing a new woman. He was introducing a new narrative. Young, healthy, strategic, future-focused. The optics were almost impressive, if I hadn't helped build them. Because that's the part he forgot. Was before Ethan became untouchable, he was ambitious, but underfunded. Halston Ridge didn't explode because of his charisma. It expanded because of one strategic acquisition. A holding company, transferred quietly, under my maiden name. Before our marriage, before the press, before the image, before the myth. He believed he was self-made. He wasn't. He was leveraged, and the leverage had my signature on it. 3 days later, the board meeting arrived. I dressed carefully. Not extravagantly, or not dramatically. A simple cream suit, minimal makeup, headscarf neatly tied. Strength doesn't have to shout. When I entered the building, the receptionist's eyes widened. "Mrs. Halston," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here for the board session." Upstairs, through the glass conference room walls, I saw them. Ethan, Vanessa, the board. He was mid-sentence when he noticed me. His words stopped. Vanessa turned slowly, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I watched uncertainty enter the room. Ethan stepped outside immediately. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. I held his gaze calmly. "Attending my meeting." "It's not your—" "It is," I said softly. He stared at me. Confusion, annoyance, and then the faintest flicker of doubt. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered something. Documents signed years ago, structures arranged, shares transferred quietly, or he just never imagined I would use them. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, but his voice had lost certainty. I tilted my head slightly. "You're right." Then I smiled faintly. I should be at the head of the table. And that was the moment he realized. He might not be as secure as he thought. When I walked into the boardroom, no one told me to leave. That was the first sign. Board members don't tolerate disruption. They tolerate authority. And they all knew exactly who I was. Not Ethan's wife, not the sick woman, but Claire Morgan, the original investor, the one whose holding company had quietly financed Halston Ridge's expansion 6 years ago. The one whose name didn't appear in press releases, but did appear in the legal filings. I took the empty chair at the end of the table, or not beside Ethan, not across from him, at the head. Vanessa shifted slightly in her seat. Her posture remained polished, but I could see calculation behind her eyes. She hadn't expected me to show up. She especially hadn't expected me to look composed. Ethan remained standing. "This meeting is about leadership continuity," he said firmly, trying to regain control. "Claire isn't required to be present." One of the older board members, Mr. Avery, adjusted his glasses. "Or she actually is," he said calmly. Ethan froze, a single second, but I saw it. "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked. Mr. Avery folded his hands. "Mrs. Morgan," he corrected himself deliberately, "holds 47% controlling interest through Morgan Capital Holdings." Silence. You could feel the air change. Vanessa blinked. Ethan turned toward me slowly. That's not possible. I met his eyes without emotion. It is. He shook his head once, like denial might undo paperwork. Don't I own this company? No, I said softly. You manage it. That landed harder than any insult could have. The board members weren't surprised. They had known from the beginning. When Morgan Capital stepped in years ago, it was structured deliberately. Public perception placed Ethan as the visionary CEO. It made for a cleaner narrative, a charismatic founder, a driven entrepreneur, a strong male leader. Investors like simple stories. But legally? Legally, control had always been diversified, and majority voting power had always been tied to Morgan Capital, my company. My father helped structure it, I added quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hated it when I reminded him that my family had been in finance long before he ever stepped into a tailored suit. You never said. You never asked. Vanessa leaned forward cautiously. Is this a marital dispute? She asked, carefully neutral. I turned toward her. No, I replied. This is corporate governance. Mr. Avery cleared his throat. Ethan requested this emergency session to discuss succession planning due to Claire's health. There it was. Succession, replacement, optics. He suggested we explore transitional leadership to maintain market confidence, Mr. Avery continued. I nodded slowly. Did he also mention he filed for divorce during my treatment? The room went still. Ethan's head snapped toward me. That's irrelevant, he said sharply. Is it? I asked. Mr. Avery's expression shifted. The younger board member, Mrs. Patel, exchanged a look with another director. Public scandal is a risk, but abandoning a spouse undergoing cancer treatment? That's reputational suicide, and boards protect valuation above ego. This meeting is about the company, Ethan insisted. Exactly, I replied. Then I reached into my folder and slid a document across the table, which is why I'm formally invoking majority review. Vanessa's composure faltered slightly. What does that mean? She asked. It means, Mr. Avery explained slowly, eyes on Ethan, that Mrs. Morgan can call for an executive performance evaluation vote. Ethan stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You wouldn't, he said quietly. I tilted my head. You believed I was weak, I said softly. You believed I was distracted. His breathing grew heavier. You're sick, he said. And still thinking clearly, I replied. Silence pressed down on the table. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't emotional. It was structural. As Ethan had tried to secure the company by removing instability. But in doing so, he had underestimated where stability actually came from. Not charisma, not an image, not Vanessa's polished PR strategy. Control, ownership, voting rights. Mr. Avery spoke again. Given recent developments, I believe a vote is appropriate. Ethan looked around the table. For loyalty, for defense, for support. He found none. Vanessa sat very still now, because she understood something before he did. And if he fell, she wasn't rising. She was collateral. I built this company, Ethan said quietly. No, I corrected gently. We built it. And that was the part he could never accept. The vote was called. 5 hands, then 6, then 7. Unanimous. Interim CEO review, effective immediately. Ethan's title wasn't revoked yet, but his authority was frozen pending evaluation, which, in corporate language, means the same thing. He sank back into his chair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, not weak, just stripped of illusion. Vanessa stood slowly. I wasn't aware of the full ownership structure, she said carefully. Of course she wasn't. Ethan never told her. He liked being the hero of his own narrative. She gathered her folder. Excuse me. And just like that, his seamless transition plan evaporated. The board members began discussing next steps, risk mitigation, public messaging, stability language. Ethan didn't speak. He just stared at the table, at the place where he thought his empire sat securely. I stood slowly. My body is still tired, my treatment is still ongoing, but my voice is steady. This isn't personal, I said quietly. It never was. He looked up at me. There was no anger left now. Just a realization. You set me up, he whispered. I met his gaze. No. I paused. You underestimated me. And that's worse. He didn't follow me out of the boardroom immediately. He stayed seated and staring at the polished mahogany table like it might offer him a different outcome if he looked long enough. I walked slowly toward the elevator. Not because I wanted him to catch up, but because chemo had left my body tired in ways pride could not fix. The hallway was silent. Corporate buildings are always after a vote like that. People sense when a king has fallen. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and just before they closed, his hand stopped them. Claire. His voice wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't commanding. It was human. I stepped back slightly so he could enter. The doors closed. For the first time in years, we were alone, without assistants, without lawyers, without board members, just husband and wife, or what was left of it. You could have told me, he said quietly. I did, I replied. He shook his head. Not like that. I studied his reflection in the mirrored wall, the tailored suit, the perfectly knotted tie, what the man who believed control was permanent. You stopped listening a long time ago, I said gently. The elevator descended in silence. You humiliated me, he said. I turned toward him fully now. You served me divorce papers, but I was powerful before today. That's the part he never understood. Power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It waits. The elevator opened into the lobby. Employees pretended not to stare. Phones were already buzzing. Rumors are moving faster than facts. He stepped out beside me. What happens now? He asked. There was no arrogance left in his voice, only uncertainty. Now, I said calmly, the board conducts its review. And us? That question held something real, something fragile. For the first time since my diagnosis, he wasn't talking about the company. He was talking about us. I looked at him carefully. The man who once held my hand in the emergency room when I thought I was losing our first baby. The man who promised forever. The man who chose reputation over presence. You left first, I said softly. He swallowed. I was scared. I was dying. That silence was heavier than anything else we'd exchanged. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture no longer polished, just tired. I thought if I separated the chaos, I could control it. You tried to control the wrong thing. Because illness doesn't obey authority, and love doesn't survive convenience. Outside the building, the city moved normally. Cars, noise, life. Nothing announces the collapse of a marriage. It just shifts quietly. But I never wanted to lose you, he said. You lost me in the hospital, I replied. The words weren't cruel, they were factual. He stood there for a long moment. Then he asked something different. Are you going to remove me? He meant from the company, from the CEO position, from the empire he thought was entirely his. I considered the question. This was the moment the audience expected revenge. But revenge is emotional, and I wasn't emotional. "I'm going to let the board do its job," I said. His eyes searched my face. "For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you." I held his gaze steadily. Love without loyalty is branding. That one hurt him. I could see it. He had built an empire on image. But the image doesn't hold your hand during chemo. An image doesn't sit beside you when your hair falls out. Image doesn't choose you when you're inconvenient. The press release came 3 days later. Helston Ridge Holdings announces interim executive oversight during strategic review. The neutral language, corporate tone, no scandal. He wasn't fired, but he wasn't untouchable anymore. And for the first time, he knew it. At home, he packed quietly. No screaming, no broken glass, just folded suits placed into expensive luggage. "I'll stay at the Meridian," he said. I nodded. Not cold, not cruel, just clear. At the door, he paused. "If you recover," he said softly, "and if you still want this, I'll fight for it." I met his eyes. "If I recover," I said gently, "or I won't fight for someone who walked away." The door closed, and the house felt different, not emptier, just honest. Weeks later, during my final treatment cycle, I received an update. The board voted to restructure executive leadership. Ethan would transition into a non-operational advisory role. Not removed entirely, but no longer in control. Vanessa resigned quietly. The market stabilized, investors calmed, and I remained the majority stakeholder. But that wasn't the real victory. Or the real victory was this: I survived. Not just the cancer, but the illusion. Because the day he filed for divorce, he thought I was weak. The day the board voted, he learned the difference between visibility and authority. And sometimes, the most dangerous woman in the room is the one you believed was too quiet to matter.